Everybody. Welcome to Meet and Eat Together. My name is Melissa Gerson. I am the founder of My Three Square, which is the platform that we're using today for our therapeutic meal. I'm also a therapist, and I'm the clinical director of Columbus Park, which is a treatment center in New York City. And our specialty is eating disorders. And what we're going to do today is have a meal together. We're going to be eating, my guest and I will be eating while you're eating at home, hopefully. And we're going to walk through a typical treatment center therapy meal, beginning with the check-in, working through an intention, having our meal together while Samantha, my guest, and I talk. And then at the end, I'm going to be teaching a bit of a skill that hopefully will be helpful for people to take home with them. So my guest today is Samantha Goren. She is a registered dietitian in Toronto, Canada. And she's also the founder of Food Home Co., which is a blog for nutrition and food. And I'm excited to talk to her today. The talk focus is going to be what is normal eating anyway? And so we'll talk about what is normal eating, but also a few other topics that I think might be of interest to our community. So the first thing that we do when we start a meal together in a treatment setting is that we check in on the components that we're bringing to the lunch meal. We give very, very kind of basic guidelines for what people need to bring to the meal. We say that, the meal needs to be balanced, it needs to be adequate to meet your needs, and it should ideally have some form of protein, carbohydrate, appropriate amount of fat, some kind of fat content. And then it can have fruits and vegetables if you'd like. But generally, when we facilitate the meal as the provider sitting maybe at the head of the table, we really look around and we get a sense just by looking whether the meals look like they're enough to meet the individual's needs. And sometimes if it seems that the meal someone brought is not enough, we might supplement it with an extra side or something else that can help flesh out the meal a little bit. So I'm going to share my meal today. I'm not getting very creative here, unfortunately, because my meal is another sandwich. It's a ham and Swiss sandwich with honey mustard and a handful of chips and an orange juice. And I also have some club soda in case I'm still thirsty after I finish my juice. So the way that I chose my meal and portioned it is that, again, I'm really just trying to work with what we have in the house. Access to food is not as easy as it usually is because of the COVID crisis. So we have ham and cheese around. This is actually my second time having this in 2 weeks, and I hadn't had it in a very long time because I just never think of ham. But I have family staying with me now, and they eat ham. So here I have ham. And it tasted good last week, so I'm looking forward to it again. In terms of, how much ham and Swiss I put on, I'd say it's about maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, or maybe even an inch thick. And then to measure the potato chips, I really just grab a handful. I'm not using measuring cups or anything like that. And the glass of juice, I just filled a glass. And so that's something that we work toward in eating disorder recovery, is getting to a place where you can be a bit more flexible around assembling your meal, using your judgment to get a sense of whether the meal looks adequate, moving away from precision and detail, just feeling more relaxed and flexible with your meal choices. And then also really being confident that if the meal you have put together for yourself isn't enough, that you'll allow yourself to have more, or you'll allow yourself to have a snack in a little bit, or you'll have dessert. And that's, I think, a really important piece of the psychology of being better, being more recovered, is that you just have faith and trust that you'll get what you need. You're not kind of waiting for the next restriction or, waiting for the opportunity to eat because you don't allow yourself. So that kind of permission that we give ourselves really opens the door for much more flexibility and ease around eating. So Samantha, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Is my sound okay?
Your meal, yep, sound is great.
Okay.
You brought a meal as well.
Yes. So I made like an avocado toast with poached eggs. I feel like eggs are really easy right now, and because you have it on hand. And I mean, I just smushed some avocado and put some olive oil on the bread and seasoned it with some salt and pepper and put a poached egg on each one. And then I have like a mini key lime pie left over from last night that I just scrounged from the fridge.
Yeah.
So, and I really like how, Melissa, you were describing how you portion things out, because I think with our patients, that's something that we really try to convey to them, how to understand what is a normal portion. And we'll get into that later, but how it's really, there's a range, and it's not you can't tell someone a cup of chips is normal, because there are so many factors. And I'd love to get into, how do you know what a normal portion is? We can even get into that later.
Yeah. And in some ways it's sort of funny. We when you and I spoke last week, the question came up, people ask what's normal eating, but in some way I almost feel funny about using the word normal because there's a judgment somehow ingrained in it. So for people out there to just kind of forgive us, because it's not like there's normal and abnormal, but I think our use of the word normal really reflects that that's often a question people ask, that they feel in some way that their eating is abnormal, and they want to know what it looks like to eat without judgment, without restriction, without a lot of kind of the shoulds and should nots that that we get stuck in a lot in when we're more of a disordered place.
And I think we almost see normal as the opposite of disordered.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe normal is not the best word, but it seems to be the easiest word. And it can there can be a whole range of normal, and there can be funny, weird, quirky things people do within the context of normal.
Absolutely. It's a continuum, and it's a pretty wide range. And also to note, whether a meal is adequate or not. I mean, there's such a, my needs are different than your needs, which are different from many of the people that are watching today. So it's really hard. And maybe you and I can talk about this during the meal, how you really can know how you're meeting your needs and how to meet your needs. So
absolutely.
We'll put that on pause, but we'll speak about that in a few minutes. So in a therapeutic meal, in a treatment setting, after we check in about our components and make sure the meal in front of us is going to meet our needs, it's adequate, it's appropriate, then we usually set an intention for the meal. And that can be just something that you're going to be mindful of during the meal, whether it's your pacing or practicing a skill or interrupting negative thoughts or practicing self-compassion or self-validation. So today I think I'm going to practice self-compassion during the meal, because oftentimes as I'm trying to juggle all the different things, I say something stupid, or I mix up my words, or I dribble food out of my mouth. So I'm going to try not to judge myself when that happens, and just keep going and know that I'm kind of doing the best I can in a difficult situation. So after we set an intention, then usually we start to eat. And most of the time, what I hear from participants in meal support is that it's really most helpful not to be too mindful of eating. You want to be aware of your pace, so you complete a meal in a reasonable amount of time. And it definitely, at a certain point in the recovery process, it's helpful to connect with your hunger and fullness. But often in the early stages of recovery, those cues are just not reliable. So we almost kind of support eating in a more robotic way, just a very regular way, almost mechanically, to complete the meal. And so I forget what I was saying. You see what I mean? This is what happens to me often. But at any rate, so we're gonna work on completing the meal within 30 minutes.
You were saying you don't want to be too mindful.
That's right. Thank you. That's right. We don't want to be too mindful. So what actually we end up doing oftentimes is really trying to direct our attention to the conversation, to not be thinking too much about the meal, and instead really listening and trying to be present and avoiding those thoughts that can produce some anxiety. Thank you very much, Samantha.
And I think it's a good point, because it goes the same with the approach to food and normal eating, like everything in moderation, including moderation. That's a famous quote from Julia Child. And so you could do too much of moderation, and I think you can do too much of mindful eating to the point where then it's not helpful.
Yeah. And it can kind of encourage some of that and more anxiety that people have during mealtime.
Absolutely.
Hopefully people will be, attending to the conversation. I'm going to be eating my meal throughout. I'm going to try to keep a steady pace. So if somebody out there, any of you are working on pacing, you can look at my pacing. Samantha, you're going to do the best you can to eat while we're talking, but you're going to speak more than I am, really.
Yeah, I'm gonna prioritize answering your questions. Great. And eat when I can. And I just want to disclose that I have 3 little kids at home, obviously. So doing my best to keep them away for now. But if there's some interruptions, I just want people to be aware.
Thanks for letting us know. Yeah. I'm setting the alarm for 15 minutes. That means, when we're halfway finished with the meal portion, I'll let you guys know. That way you can kind of time yourself so you're pacing in order to complete within about 30 minutes. And I'll let you know also when we have 5 minutes left of the meal. So I'm going to start eating, and I'm going to ask you my first question, Samantha.
Yeah.
Many people talk about intuitive eating. You hear a lot about it. You read a lot about it. Can you share with the group what intuitive eating is and where it fits into eating disorder recovery?
Yeah. So intuitive eating is fantastic. It's the goal. It's what we all want to be doing. But I think sometimes it's almost picked up as a bit of a hot word and a trend word, and it's sometimes being misused, in my opinion, because I think it's being used by people who don't fully understand what it is or how to use it. And by people, I mean maybe some health professionals, maybe some like wellness influencers, maybe even some just individuals who are saying I try to eat intuitively, but they don't really fully understand it and how it's applied. And I think for people who have eating disorders to constantly hear this messaging from, let's just say, for example, through social media, like just eat intuitively, eat what you want, when you want, and don't worry about it. Don't feel guilty. I'm all on board for that. That's the goal. But I think for some of you guys, that can be a bit infuriating because it's not that easy for you. And there's a lot of skills and a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into getting there. So to hear people who don't specialize in eating disorders tell you to just eat intuitively and all you have to do is not feel guilty, I think is a little bit unreasonable and not practical. So that's just something I think that I wanted to say, because I think it's frustrating for you guys. Like, you're hearing it and you're like, but like, why can't I apply it? It's because you have an illness.
I think, one thing I just want to say also is that I think that oftentimes people push intuitive eating too early in eating disorder recovery.
Yeah.
And it creates this pressure that at some point early on in your recovery, you should be able to know what you feel like eating. You should be able to know when you're hungry, know when you're full. And eating disorder behaviors really rob you of that ability for some time. And so it's really, again, one of the foundations of treatment is really getting into a regular schedule and eating consistently during that regular schedule. And just for a while, you may be on a meal plan, or you may actually just know from looking at a meal whether it's going to be enough for you. And then really having to practice that, because if you're still at any eating disorder mindset at all, invariably as you're eating, there's going to be interruption to cues that you're still hungry. There are going to be feelings like you should stop, that you don't want to complete your meal, that, it's too much. And that really gets in the way of that ability to just listen and really respond to your body. So again, that's generally a skill that we work on much later in the recovery process.
I sometimes describe it to patients, like, for instance, when somebody has a stroke and they have lost the ability to walk or walk normally. And so you have to go through rehab, and your brain is signaling normally to your legs to walk. And so through rehab, you're actually having to learn to walk again. And one day you might walk completely normally, but you'll have to do that mechanical holding onto those bars and someone saying left foot first, put a bit more pressure. So, it's very similar that you have to do that real mechanical work in order to get to that place where you could naturally walk again, or naturally
That's a great analogy.
Normal way.
Yeah.
I'm very big on analogies. All my patients know that, but Yeah, I think that the hope and the goal is that if you put that work in, the shift will occur, and one day you'll wake up and you will understand what normal is, and you will be able to just do that
Yeah.
and just be like, I feel like pizza tonight, and eat it and have no feelings about it. Like, that's
Yeah.
the goal. But it's going to happen on its own. But in order for it to happen, you need to do your therapy, you need to see your dietitian, and you need to do the work on your own
Yeah.
on a regular basis.
Samantha, can you just share a little bit more what intuitive eating is actually?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say intuitive eating, we mean understanding when you're hungry, understanding when you're full, understanding what you are in the mood to eat, which sometimes means you don't know what you feel like eating. Like, for instance, Melissa today may have been like, I'm not sure what I feel like. Maybe I'll have ham. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. That's intuitive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you know you're in the mood for something and sometimes you don't. And it's really that natural, very natural, organic process of understanding what your body needs. And part of that, and something we often explain in treatment, is the fact that when people are asking about portions, it's important to understand that your body is really good at intuitively knowing how much you need. So your body needs X number of calories in a day, let's say, and I'm going to say that word because it's not a
Yeah.
bad word. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a good thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
the unit of energy that our body needs to live. Then your body will try to make that up. And so if I always say, like, if you go for lunch with a friend and you have a burger and fries, and you're pretty full, like, naturally you would adjust. Like, maybe that day you don't feel like a snack because you're still full from lunch. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not intentionally trying to compensate, but your
Mm-hmm.
body is less hungry, and vice versa. If you have a lighter lunch, you might be more hungry in the afternoon or the evening. And our body is really good at that. And that's intuitive. And that's why some people, I mean, physiologically end up binging, because your body's really trying to meet its needs by the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, the body is so smart and is almost like a thermostat, and its ability to recognize, have I had enough or have I not had enough? And then when you're in that intuitive place, you will naturally be told by your body that it's time to eat. And it may tell you you're thirsty, or it may tell you you're hungry for something hearty, or it may tell you you're hungry for something sweet. And generally, the idea is that you can trust in your body to give it what
Yeah.
it wants or needs in that moment.
So when you're in the midst of the eating disorder and people come to us and they're like, but I don't feel hungry ever, I don't know when I'm full, that's because your signals now have been disrupted. So that's where we actually try to reinforce that mechanical eating to get you on a plan to eat despite feeling hungry or feeling full. We kind of tell you how much to eat and when to eat.
Yeah.
And because you've lost that ability, and that's very normal. But if you do the work, it will come back, and there are lots of ways to do that.
So then, would you say that intuitive eating is normal eating? Are those the same? In one, both the same, kind of equal or parallel?
I think that they're parallel. I think that they're different, but like, if you eat intuitively, you also probably eat normally. If you eat normally, you also eat intuitively. But I think there are people who are eating what they want when they want. Their signals are working when they're hungry and full, but there's still a lot of restraint around the types of foods they're eating.
Yeah.
So they might actually believe that they're practicing intuitive eating, and they really might be, but the normal part might not be fully there. And there might be a bit of disordered eating. So I think normal to me, and we don't have like a textbook definition of these things, but I think to me normal is that you don't have rules and regulations, and you can go to a party and you can eat whatever. If it's chicken wings and fries, you'll eat that. You're not going to say, oh, I don't eat that, right? Like, that to me is what dictates normal eating. That's just one very small example. Whereas intuitive eating has more to do with, the knowing what you feel like, and the hunger and fullness.
Yeah. I guess on a similar note, sometimes people will have questions like, well, how often is it normal to have dessert? how often should I have
Yeah.
dessert? I know, if all I did was eat dessert all day for every meal, I know that's not, quote unquote healthy. But
Yeah.
how do I know how often is okay?
I actually love those questions because I love the fact that there's no answer.
Mhm.
You can't really tell someone very specifically how much dessert is normal to have, how the frequency of it.
Yeah.
But we can certainly give people direction, and we can give them examples. And I'll when I get asked this question, I'll say I think it's normal to have a dessert every single day,
Mhm.
if that's what you feel like, right? But I think you could also have a week where you don't have any, and then you could
Mhm.
have a dessert every day. You might sometimes have 2 in a day. I mean, I think it's all in the context of
Yeah.
the overall picture. And when we see people and we assess them, we're able to really understand and determine if there's any problematic behavior. So if someone came to see you and they're like, I think I eat too much dessert because I eat one every day, and all of their eating looked perfectly normal and beautiful, like that wouldn't be something that you would ever worry about. Whereas if somebody was, eating cake 5 times a day, that might be every single day, there might be something disordered there going on.
It's funny because I see some chat notes coming in, and one person's writing, that always confuses me, how often should I have dessert? And so I appreciate that, your answer, and that, like, first off, like, what's a should? A should is kind of a dangerous word because it implies that there's a right or wrong. And so I wonder if maybe part of answering the question, how often should I have dessert, is to sort of, ask yourself, are you truly giving yourself permission? Is this, what are your judgments around dessert? Because I think it's almost as if dessert has landed in the bad category. And one of the ways I like to respond to that is that, people who may have that tendency to put things in a good or bad category,
Yeah.
may also kind of label those categories as healthy and not healthy. And
Yeah.
what I like to talk about is expanding the term healthy to actually apply to, is it healthy to be able to eat in a number of different contexts? Is it is it healthy to be able to go anywhere and be able to nourish yourself? Is it healthy to enjoy food? And the answer is absolutely, right? Like, it's so healthy to be able to enjoy your food. I think that's what we're all kind of working toward. So in that on that note, it's healthy to enjoy dessert, but oftentimes I think people with eating disorders really want to know more specifically. I think there's almost like, maybe it's part of the temperament of people who might be more vulnerable to eating disorders, that they are kind of tend to be more precise and detail oriented.
Yeah.
And there's a woman named Janine Roth, who's an author, and she wrote a really amazing book. I thought this book was so impactful. It's called Breaking Free from Emotional Eating. And I really love the way she talks about, and I think the term she used is a buzzing food versus a humming food. And I found this a really helpful way to help myself make decisions when I have a craving for something. So the idea, if something's humming, if it's a humming food, it means that, you've developed a hunger for it. Maybe it's something you've been thinking about, like, I'm kind of in the mood for pizza. I want to have pizza this week. I don't know. I saw someone eating pizza the other day and it kind of stayed with me, or even, I kind of feel like having an Oreo right now. I'm going to kind of see, like, I let me see how I feel in a couple of minutes. If it's still humming, if the Oreo is still humming to me in a couple of minutes, then, then I'm going to give myself the Oreo. But then there's this idea of a buzzing food, and a buzzing food is more like a zap. Like, for example, you walk by a pizza place,
Yeah.
you smell the pizza and you're like, I want it. It's almost like that impulse in the moment. I want it. I didn't want it 5 minutes ago. I only kind of wanted it because I smelled it. And it may just be in response to just this momentary desire that you have because it smells so good. So it's kind of this nice idea about differentiating when something's actually like a true desire or craving versus like an impulsive moment where you just kind of want something and then you go for it. So I use that for myself. And it kind of helps me figure out a balance around, because I have a big sweet tooth and I really enjoy desserts. And maybe if I could see myself wanting dessert like after every meal of the day, which one might argue might be a lot of dessert, and won't leave me as much room for food that might be more nourishing, giving more energy. So I often will do that. Is this humming to me or is it buzzing me? Is it humming as in, I really kind of feel like I've been wanting this for a little while, or is it just an impulse? I'm going into the kitchen, I'm grabbing the Oreo. And someone wrote here, I feel, I always struggle with feeling ashamed for even wanting or craving dessert food, even if I don't actually have it. And that's such a common, that's so common, the amount of shame that we really have around our desire for food, or our desire for the pleasure of food. And I think that's something that is so at the foundation of so many struggles with food, that there's almost a shame, like you shouldn't want to enjoy that pleasure. Like for some reason, we're not supposed to experience pleasure. So it's kind of an interesting, we're about halfway through the meal portion.
That's what the eating disorder tells you, right? Like obviously that's not a normal thought, but the eating disorder tells you you shouldn't have pleasure when it comes to food.
I mean, why do we have taste buds if we're not supposed to, taste food, right? Like we are created, our bodies are created in such a way that we're supposed to experience pleasure when we eat. We have taste buds so we can taste different flavors, and we have a reward center of our brain that gets activated when we eat food. So, we are created in such a way to be able to enjoy food, yet at the same time, so often we're ashamed of that.
When you say that, it reminds me that another thing I say is that like we shouldn't be overly emotional about food. And I've even heard that normalized on social media, that it's normal to engage in emotional eating. Which I disagree with. I think that, is it normal? I think it's normal in some ways, like to say I had a really hard day and it'd be really nice to like enjoy, to like order in that my favorite pizza tonight. Like, could that be normal? Yeah. But I think if we could replace ordering in your favorite pizza with like watching your favorite movie, like then it's okay. Right. But when we get overly emotional about that food, like I am stressed and therefore I'm going to eat an extra large pizza, or every time I feel this emotion, I'm going to eat, or I'm overly excited about pizza and I've thought about it for 2 days in a row, all day, every day. That's not normal. And it's normal to get excited about foods like that we love sometimes, but it's not normal to be like thinking about it all the time and obsess over it, and in both directions, whether it's positive or negative. So
the way
I don't know why that came up, but it just came up for me, that thought.
I think, about whether emotional eating is okay or not okay. I think the way I think about it is more like, is it troubling to you? So, I would say sometimes I do eat emotionally. Like I'll be excited on a cold night to, if it's like a snowy night and I'm like excited to get home and I want to make something really comforting, and I'm looking forward to like sitting down with my chili and cozying up and having a glass of wine maybe with my meal. And I think it's very soothing to me, and it does comfort me in those moments. Like where I think, having something like light and crisp would not at all, or it brightens my mood to know that I have mint chocolate chip Haagen-Dazs in my freezer today, and that like I'm looking forward to that lately. And I think that where emotional eating might be problematic is really more if it upsets you, if it leaves you feeling bad or guilty afterwards. I think that's where it might cross the line to being something that's worth exploring further. But if but if you find comfort in food on occasion and it soothes you or it distracts you, and you don't notice yourself feling agitated or upset about it, then that's great. Then it's not a problem and kind of natural.
And I wouldn't even call that emotional eating. I think it's like using it to comfort you. And that the example that I gave is like, if you could replace it with something else, like potentially.
Well, that's a good point, because we all, ideally you have multiple skills for coping, right? A cozy cup of chili on a cold night is one way of self-soothing, but ideally I think it's helpful if we can be flexible and have other strategies that we can also use that can be soothing. in addition.
Mhm.
That we're not overly reliant on the food to be the primary go-to. And I think in certain conditions, like with binge eating disorder and often with bulimia too, the food becomes really a major coping mechanism. I mean, it really is
Yeah.
the primary go-to, and that's where it can become problematic.
And food giving you comfort is actually normal and good. But I think when you're using it to cope with how you're feeling, like you're saying,
Mhm.
in an extreme way, then that's where it becomes a problem. And these things, it's so hard for us to discuss these live because everyone's case is so different. So if you're feeling lost in this conversation, I think if you're able to connect with a therapist or a dietitian, you can really clarify for yourself which behaviors are problematic and which are not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to turn a little bit now
Yeah.
to talk about a term that gets thrown around a lot called it's orthorexia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if folks out there have heard of it, but maybe you can share with the audience, what is orthorexia and how do you think about it and how do you treat it within the context of nutrition therapy?
Yeah, there's a lot of articles about orthorexia, even though it's not in the DSM. But I mean, we're accepting the term. I do. I don't label it, but people, which I can't do anyway, I can't diagnose, but we use the term. It's a legit term, I think. And it's this obsession with health and healthy eating. So the example I was giving earlier around someone might actually be eating intuitively, but not normally, that orthorexia could fall into there. So they could be eating enough calories. They could be meeting all of their nutritional needs potentially, but their eating is a bit extreme, and there's such a range. And I think the best example to give you is a lot of the wellness bloggers or influencers on social media. I'm just giving that as one example, but I mean, like my lunch looked pretty picture perfect today because I made it and prepared it and I was able to shoo off my kids, but obviously that's not what my lunch looks like every day. And sometimes we're grabbing leftovers and throwing them in the microwave, a stale bagel, you put some cream cheese on it. But if you look on their accounts, like everything looks pretty picture perfect of what they're eating. And there's always substitutions and things are always refined sugar free and things are always better and superior because they don't have grains or this or that. And I'm just throwing out random things, but it's really this, there can be a range of it. Like there can be way more extreme cases and ones that look quite normal and balanced. But even when I hear sometimes I'm saying things like, I'm treating myself and I eat pasta because I'm normal and just sometimes it's okay to indulge. I'm like, you're not indulging by eating pasta, right? Like to me, that's a grain. You're eating pasta. Like that's not an indulgence. That's just a normal staple. And so that to me is a bit disordered and I think it's being normalized in social media is really the issue. And so you're seeing all their plates and their meals that are like very perfectly healthy, you would say, in that traditional sense of the term healthy. And so then people perceive that that's how they should eat. And
Right.
It creates a lot of anxiety. And I mean, I think some of it's done for the camera, but I think a lot of it's real. I do believe that they're actually eating that. And I don't think they're being fake about it, but I think they eat in this super rigid, healthy way that it's to the point where it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that, the term orthorexia, I guess, there's a whole continuum in relation to preoccupation, just how much focus and attention your eating and your nourishment in general require. But I think, I think in our society, this concept of healthy it's really all over the place. We're constantly exposed to messaging that's often conflicting around right and wrong and good and bad. And it's very anxiety provoking because, first off, you can't even keep up with the news. One minute, they'll say something is really good for you. The next minute they'll say it's really bad for you. And I think that's really destabilizing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think if your temperament or your biological kind of constitution leaves you vulnerable to developing an eating disorder, which is the case, these are biologically based conditions. They're based on your brain chemistry, and then other factors come into play that make these genetic predisposition really come to the fore. But I think these conflicting messages and this idea that there's good and bad in certain brains really can be very influential. And there can be this idea, well, if there's a right and a wrong, I want to do what's right. And not only do I want to do what's right, but I really want to do it well. And I want to achieve mastery around what's right. And if being right is being stereotypically healthy, well, then I'm going to do it to the nth degree. And I think it just becomes, it can just very quickly become more and more extreme.
And it flies under the radar, which is part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, oftentimes we get comments about our eating. Oftentimes people will look at your meal, and if they see you eating something that's stereotypically healthy, they'll say, oh my gosh, you're such a healthy eater. How do you do it? So there's this reinforcement that we get in our society around it. And it just seems really misguided to me, because again, the concept of health just changes all the time. And I think it's often very narrow, what is healthy. And I really feel very strongly that healthy means that you can eat with flexibility, and that you can live in this world, in our reality, and be able to move through different settings and with different people, and be able to nourish yourself. And that means, eating all kinds of foods and enjoying all kinds of foods. So, I think do you have like an Instagram account or handle or something, like something about Truth in Social?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So it's called Truth in Social on Instagram. And the purpose of it is to try to dispel a lot of these myths around nutrition and health, but also to bring forward a lot of the truths that are not shown when it comes to social media, and to inspire people to do the same, and to educate people to understand that what you see is not always real. When you see that perfect feed that shows that perfect life, to really help educate, especially young people, to understand that that's not real. That's just a picture, and it's just a highlight reel. And, if people can kind of open their eyes to that, and to understand the impact that what they post and what they put there has on other people, maybe hopefully they'll change the way that they post, especially people who have influence. And so that's the goal of it. You can check it out. It's still being developed, and there'll be a lot of exciting things to come.
Interesting. Thank you.
It's myself and another dietitian who run it.
Well, I think it goes without saying that our social media, it takes over our worldview. I mean, we're just bombarded with messaging, and so much of the messaging is structured to kind of make you feel like you're not living up in some way. In some way you're falling short, or someone else has done it better, or someone's else's life is better. And I think even right now with this crisis currently, we're so stuck on our devices, and so much of our interaction is through media. So I think it's even more intense right now. I mean, I just feel like my Instagram, if I even look at Instagram, it's just on fire. I mean, everybody is just out there, and it's so natural, because I think we're all trying to connect and be seen. We don't want to be squirreled away like we don't exist anymore. So I think it's so natural to be just out there, but it's almost alarming at how quickly it's just even becoming more and more pronounced.
Yeah. And it's natural for people to want to show the best of the best. Like, I think that's how this all started.
Yeah.
Why would people be posting bad stuff? Like, why? Right. And I don't think it was with bad intention at first, but it was, look at our beautiful trip, and look at us posing together at our family picnic or barbecue. And so it became this highlight reel. But it was really affecting people. And then so on my own account, Food Home Co, it's called, I really try to do what I can to show a bit of the real side of life, of motherhood, of cooking and food, and a little bit of everything. But I also want to inspire people with food and show them what it's like to have a healthy relationship with food, and show them how the way that I'm cooking with butter and sugar and no substitutions. And
Yeah.
but sometimes it's healthier and sometimes it's not, and that's normal. And so to give people that example where they can follow and see that on an ongoing basis, I think is helpful to people who don't understand it. So they're getting that snippet from us right now from one meal. But I mean, it's not like I'm posting all my meals or anything, but if I'm making, I mean, I was making cinnamon rolls the other day. And so I think it's good for people to see that, like me spreading the butter and the sugar on, and not saying I made this with
a dietitian does that. Yeah, I think it means something different when you see a dietitian, living their own lives with feeling secure with these food items that have been so villainized by so many. So
yeah. So I try to do that. And I've noticed it's helped people without eating disorders. Like there's a lot of just regular moms who follow me who really feel guilty when they aren't eating gluten-free, or feel like they should be making cookies with almond flour because all these people they follow do. And so to be able to see what I do has helped them to not feel guilty making pasta a few nights a week, and to normalize all of that. And I think there's just so much. So if people without an illness are being affected, we know how much, people who actually suffer with an eating disorder are being affected. I know that was your timer.
Oh yeah. So the timer, I realized I forgot to give the 5-minute warning that we were getting, we had about 5 minutes left of the meal portion. So no worries. But, essentially that was about 30 minutes for the meal. And so, not that there's some magic number, and some people take a longer time to eat and others take less time, but at our center, we try to do the meal portion in 30 minutes, because we've noticed that a lot, I think I'd say the vast majority of folks that come to meal support struggle with like a slower pace. So it takes them a long time to complete meals, and that can kind of get in the way. It's harder to take a break from work and grab your lunch, or take a break from schoolwork. So we really want to try to get the eating into a time frame that works with life. So what we'll often do after we eat is we kind of check in, we go around the table, we get a sense of how people are feeling both physically and emotionally. We ask people how they felt about their meal. I'll share that I really enjoyed my meal. I was super hungry, and I'm still hungry. So I don't think it was quite enough for me. And so, it's interesting because this is a similar meal that I had earlier in the week, and that day it was enough for me. So I think it just really kind of it sort of highlights the fact that our needs change all the time, which is tricky. It's really tricky then to know how much to feed yourself. And so if I were operating in an earlier stage of recovery from an eating disorder, most likely what I would do is, I might have eaten this meal and still have been hungry, but I would know that I'm going to have a snack in just a little while. And so I might either help myself to some more food if I felt safe with doing that, depending on where I was in my recovery process. If it felt safe enough for me to have some more food, I might do that. Or I might just agree that I'm staying with the structure, and I'm going to have my snack in a little while, because I'm kind of trying to get back in touch with hunger and fullness cues. And just to clarify, it never means, if you're feeling hungry, you always have to eat. It's never appropriate, in my opinion. If your body's telling you that you're hungry, it's never appropriate not to eat. So, my plan will be when this is over to go get myself a snack, and probably have my snack a little bit closer to my lunchtime. So we check in on how people feel about the meal. We check in about how people are feeling emotionally. And then we kind of very quickly move on, because we really don't want to open up a lot of emotion after mealtime. We really want to move into moving forward with our day and moving on from the meal. So we typically will work on a skill. We'll come up with a plan for the afternoon. And generally, it involves kind of learning something new. So today I'm going to teach a little something. And Samantha, if you want to work on your meal, I'm going to let you have a moment of fun.
I ended up somehow able to finish the whole thing.
Okay.
And that was probably it was actually a luxury to have that amount of time to eat because, with the kids, like I have to eat pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, so what was it like for you to have a little bit more time and to be able to,
it was weird. It was like fine dining. It felt like to eat slowly and take your time. I was forced to take breaks because I was talking, but like to have, this is the most quiet Zen environment I've had to eat in a long time. Obviously I'm in quarantine in a house with a lot of people, including 3 little kids. So yeah, like it was really nice, but unfortunately for my lifestyle right now, it's not a novelty that I have available to me. So I eat 3 meals a day. I eat snacks. I make sure that happens no matter what. Don't skip any meals, but I have to sometimes eat fast. I have to sometimes just grab something quickly. Sometimes I bring it up to once in a while. Now that my office is in my bedroom, I'm working out of my bed because I don't have a desk. One time I had to bring the food upstairs and eat it while I was not with a patient, but eat it while working, doing an email. So it's just, we're living in a very strange situation right now. And these are skills that, come in handy to be able to do that.
Great. So I am going to pick up on where we actually keep going in the direction that we started earlier this week, because
water.
I started to teach everybody some of the core strategies of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a very particular kind of therapy that is behavioral in its foundation. And it's a treatment that's really very accessible and very concrete and practical. So it's really very much about skills training and practicing strategies that can help you cope. And so we talked at the beginning of the week about where we start in ACT, which is connecting with what's important to you, really being sure that you understand who you are and what you want for yourself. And so that may mean coming up with values, different domains of your life. So for example, what kind of a friend do you want to be in this life that you have? Or how do you want to approach your school environment or your work environment? Or what are your goals and values around your physical health? What are your goals and values around your spiritual self? And so we think about the different domains of our lives and really connecting with who we want to be and what's important. And then what we talked about next was mindfulness, because mindfulness is our way of becoming just aware in the moment of what we're thinking and feeling. And it's a really important part of living in line with your values, because it's really hard to take action that is in line with your life direction, with your values, if you're not really aware of your behaviors and your feelings and your thoughts. So we talked a little bit about mindfulness, and then we did some diffusion work, which is about separating a bit from negative thoughts so that you're able to focus on things that are really important to you, so that you're not overcome with the emotions that come up around in those intrusions of thoughts that are not productive or that are judgmental or negative. And then we talked about one other thing now. It's kind of escaping me. The diffusion, values, mindfulness, and what was the other piece? Now I'm forgetting. But at any rate, I know what it was. Experiential avoidance. So oftentimes, because it's uncomfortable to sit in feelings that are negative, and it's really uncomfortable and distressing to have thoughts that are judgmental, or we have certain memories in our lives that are painful, that we want to avoid. So oftentimes we do things to separate or to avoid those uncomfortable experiences. And those things that we do to avoid can sometimes end up being destructive in and of themselves. So for example, addiction is kind of a really good example. oftentimes people will turn to a substance in order to self-soothe or to numb out or to separate with some kind of uncomfortable or aversive experience. So we talked a bit about avoidance, experiential avoidance, and then today we're going to talk about action. And so action, when we're in the ACT framework, we think about, we've thought about what's important to us and the kind of people that we want to be and how we want to live our lives. And so the next step is really taking action in line with those values. And so I want to talk today about how you go about doing that in a way that's most effective. And so to do that, I want to talk about some of the things that get in the way of taking action in line with our values. So, one of the things that gets in the way is that sometimes we expect too much of ourselves. So we set goals that are unrealistic or that exceed our resources and lead us to kind of give up or fail. So, the resources may be certain skills, it could be time, it could be money, it could be health. But for whatever reason, we set a goal or intention for ourselves that's not achievable. So that can really get in the way of taking action. We can also have like negative thoughts or beliefs that get in the way of us taking action. We might think, well, it's not going to work anyway, or I'm not going to accomplish what I set out to do in the end. Or, we have beliefs about ourselves that we're going to fail. So oftentimes there's this kind of fusion to these negative thoughts. And then the one other thing that can get in the way is that we lose touch with the underlying principles that are behind the goal that we set for ourselves. So for whatever reason, we know that we want to be, for example, a value of mine is being more present with people, whether it's with friends or family members. So I'm connected with that. And so that drives my action, and always kind of reminding myself that I really want to be present. That allows me to take action at times that might be hard for me. Like it means that I'm putting down my phone, even though that's kind of hard, or it means I'm stepping away from my desk, or it means I'm turning my mind to be more attentive. But the closer I stay to my value that I want to be present, the easier it is to do that. And so one thing that might get in the way is that our values can feel too remote. We're not really connected with them. And so it's really kind of hard to take action. And I think that comes up a lot with recovery from an eating disorder, that it's so important to ask yourself, really, what do you want from your life? And how does this eating disorder get in the way? And if you really can stay connected to what you want, the more connected you are to what you want, I think the easier it is to do some of the really hard work of recovery. So I think what I want to try to get across from this, lesson of the day is how we can take action in line with what's important to us. And this will be a little bit of a how-to in order to do that. So the first step in taking committed action, and committed action might be sticking to your meal plan. It might be, riding out an urge to overeat or binge eat. It might be abstaining from purging. It might be, tonight, making sure that you challenge yourself with a new food that you've been avoiding. And so we want to think about what will get in the way of our taking those steps, which are really important parts of our leading a valued life. Being able to take care of your body and move through recovery is really important if you're working to be someone who's really present in your life, or if you're working to be someone who can really engage in your career and be passionate about what you're doing. You kind of need that a bit of recovery behind you in order to really fully be there. So one of the first things we need to do is we have to really consider those thoughts that hold us back. What are some of the thoughts that get in the way of you taking that action? We want to set really realistic goals for ourselves. So, really trying to make those goals measurable and clear, accessible, short term, not setting out a goal that's too far away, because too much of your motivation can get lost by the time you reach that. So, really being thoughtful about the action that we want to take and be very specific about it. And then also accepting the discomfort that may come along with it. So, understanding that staying with your meal plan today may mean that you're actually really taking important steps in your own recovery so that you can have a fuller life, which is important to you. And so, it may come with some discomfort, and we want to really try to make room for painful thoughts and painful feelings, not because we like them or we want them, but that we need to be able to allow them to be there so that we can do what matters. And then we also want to just keep reminding ourselves, especially in moments when we're lacking motivation, we have to keep reminding ourselves about why we're doing this. What is the end game and what's important and meaningful about this action? So if your action is sticking to the meal plan for this day, to continue reminding yourself about why that is. So what I might propose, if folks out there are open to working today to take, can you hear me okay, Samantha?
Yeah.
If anyone out there is interested in the idea of coming up with some sort of an action plan for the day, what I would suggest is first deciding why you're doing it. Why are you taking this difficult step, and why is it worth the struggle? So thinking bigger picture of what's important to you and what you're trying to achieve. And then really kind of working on making space for the discomfort that might come along with it. Really trying to accept that discomfort and not fighting it and just allow it to be. To really work on identifying any thoughts or feelings that are going to get in the way and allowing those thoughts and feelings to be there, but really working hard to do it anyway. So I hope folks, send me some comments or, posts that reflect on their experience with this action plan. And also while you're at it, if there are any topics that you'd enjoy hearing about on Meet and Eat Together, we have access to so many interesting people in the field, to so many people who are open and interested in sharing their recovery stories. So any feedback that people out there can provide around how we can make this program better and expand our learning in a way that will be helpful to the community. So Samantha, it was really good to see you today. I hope you have a really nice afternoon. And
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. I hope to see everybody on Monday. We have Melanie Rogers. She's a dietitian as well, and she's a colleague of mine in New York City. She runs a treatment center in New York City, and she's going to be joining us for just a kind of a casual conversation. And we're going to open up for questions and comments as well. So that's on Monday, this coming Monday at 1:00. And in the meantime, I hope everybody has a wonderful and healthy